Hello and welcome to Short Tales. For today's episode, I'm incredibly pleased to be joined by the lovely and delightful Cass Paige. Welcome, Cass.
Oh, thank you. That's a really nice intro. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. A few weeks ago, obviously, I was asking if you're happy to come on the pod and if and what you might want to talk about. And you almost immediately came up with a topic I generally think is so important and perhaps sometimes unspoken of for a lot of creatives out there or anybody just sort of learning stuff. And made me, just super excited to talk about it with you. And I don't know why I'm talking around it because I'm pretty sure it'll be the name of this episode. But Cass, what are we talking about today?
Failures.
Yay.
One of my favorite things.
Like I said, I love this. I love the idea for this topic because it is sort of, I don't know, there's a tabooness, I think, around failure that shouldn't be there. I don't know if it's just our culture is that or what. But yeah, what was it about failure? What is it about failure that makes it one of your favorite things?
I think you're spot on with it potentially just being a cultural thing. I don't know much about failure and success building otherwise in other cultures much. But I think the way we talk about failure is the way in which it's often meant in terms that you did not succeed at something.
Right.
It is so hard to not – it's as hard to not succeed at something as it is to succeed at something because they're all parameters we set ourselves. And inversely, the idea of success that we have – one of the most important things you would do in your life is to figure out what you think success is because when you sit down to do it, you'll realize it's hard.
Yeah.
Unless you have a really specific goal in mind, then it becomes a bit easier. But for a lot of people, you might be like, I want to be successful. And then you're like, no, that is something you've been told to be and you think it'll be really fulfilling.
Yes,
and it can be.
Sure.
But you need to figure out what success means to you because it's going to be different to other people. You might look at someone and think they're not successful. You might look at someone and think they're so successful. But if they don't think they're successful, doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah.
And failure has been a really beautiful discovery. I'm not about to talk about I'm not going to have any original ideas, but it's just I've curated all of the most beautiful failure lessons I've learned.
Yeah.
Can I tell everyone about them? Because I think it's made my life so much better.
Yeah.
There is such power in failing and living.
Yeah, I love it though, but I like you even sort of just reframing it in this obviously positive context, which to me, that's the trick of it. It's failure, obviously, the word itself, what you're thinking of is all negative aspects. Any sort of word association game you're going to play with it, they're going to be all these negative words.
We don't have a positive word for it.
Right. And it's well, cool. Can we, again, without getting too self-helpy, but I think it's necessary for anybody, anyone who's creative or wants to learn things to reframe it in a positive mindset because it opens doors in your mind and in your life that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Exactly.
So what set you down this path? I know when we were talking about it a while ago, you sort of had this awesome experiment you were sort of doing or?
Oh, that was actually step 2 in my process.
Okay, so let's go back. Let's start one. Yeah.
The thing that really kicked me off down my failures path, and I think this is one of the things, I knew in my brain, in my head, I knew that, if you don't succeed at something, that's that really famous quote from Adventure Time, sucking at something's the first step to being really good at something.
Yeah, love that.
If you are good at something first go, cool, but is there really going to be that challenge and reward and payoff? And some people being good at it first go is good enough. It's so fragmented even in that, even in being good at something first go or getting something right first try. Because for some people, that's just not going to bring the same level of satisfaction. For some people, the enjoyment out of life is their version of success is going to be learning, it's going to be different for every person. Yeah. And I knew all this in my head and do it once, get it wrong, try again. That's why we have first drafts. I never did a first draft in uni. I was so lazy and scrapping your first idea, but I'd leave everything to the last minute. So I just never had these things in practice.
Right.
Until I went to one of the most transformative experiences of my life, clown school for a day.
This led to failure? I don't know where the connection lies.
No, it was brilliant. So it was run by Zach Zucker, who is a Collier-trained clown.
Oh, wow. Okay,
and it was brilliant. And I got there late. I knew him, so I was I want to, do well and, impress this person who I really admire and look up to. And I got in late and walked into a circle. Everyone was standing in a circle.
Okay.
And Zach was like, okay, we're going around the circle. You say, what's your name, why you're here, and then do something funny. Oh. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't know these people. I don't know the vibe. I don't know. And this is someone who I just look up to so much and I wanted to really impress. went around the circle and I can't remember what I did, but everyone sort of gave like a awkward laugh because everyone's obviously feeling awkward. But the whole class, like the way he taught it was pretty much like you would get up and do something, and if it wasn't funny, get off the stage, try again. And then there would be, you'd get up, try something. If it didn't work, try another thing. And then eventually you'd hit a point and be like, no, get off stage, we'll try again in a bit.
Okay, yeah.
And so the class pretty much forced you to constantly fail in front of people in one of the things which, like, I mean, I don't know if it's still ranked there, but I know public speaking is ranked above death in people's greatest fears.
Yeah.
So it's pretty confronting, and I know it's, a lot easier for me because I don't mind it, but it was like, oh my God, I don't know these people. Like, this is someone I really want to impress, and I'm just trying to be funny.
Yeah.
It's so much pressure. But we were there for hours, and it got to the stage where you'd do something and you wouldn't get a laugh, and you'd get off stage, and then you'd come back later. Like, it was so fast. You didn't have time to wallow.
Yeah.
And you just keep coming up with things. And then eventually something would stick, or it wouldn't, and it didn't matter. Because you realize that every single person's in the same boat. If someone does it, you're not jealous of them. You're like, oh, sick, good.
Yeah,
or someone fails, you're just like, oh, fair enough. Like, that was me about 30 seconds ago.
Yeah, right.
And it forced you to get into this cycle. And I think one of the most valuable things that I got out of it is when you fail at something, it doesn't kill you and it doesn't do anything bad to you. Like, you might feel a bit bad, but also who cares? Like, being in that situation of constantly having to make a joke, be funny, make the whole room laugh and just eating shit at it so often was amazing. It was so good because that's so much pressure. Like, get up, tell a joke.
Yeah, man. Like,
get up, do physical comedy. Like, oh my God, am I funny?
Yeah, well, like, you're talking about, like, obviously public speaking is one of people's greatest fears. I actually was looking up yesterday, like, the fear of failure is also with, like, in the top 10. People are just like, what are your greatest fears? Or failures in there? Clowns is in there. Like, he uses this has got it all.
Yeah.
Throw some spiders up in there and that's done. You can walk away.
Yeah, do a little skit about spiders. But I think just being in that cycle of constantly failing.
Yeah.
And then you get off the stage and you try again. And then by the end of the day, you know that you've made people laugh.
Right.
And it's not 100% of the time. Of course it's not 100% of the time, but you've, amongst everything, you end up being really proud of what you did do.
Yeah.
And I came out of that feeling really good about myself, being like, yeah, wow, like,
oh, totally.
Overcoming that thing that I so genuinely, it's just, I think it's cultural, societal. It might be worldwide. It's like, it's this really, we're not allowed to not be perfect or great at something. But I think that's mostly in our heads because we don't care.
Yeah, right.
No one cares if someone's bad at it.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't really have a big effect on your own life, and it doesn't have a big effect on someone else's life. If you're watching someone be bad at something, like, if I'm thinking of like the absolute worst case scenario, it would be like, oh, that wasn't good.
Yeah, right. And that's it. And like, weirdly, like this clown class is like almost a really nice analogy for failure in the real world, because it's like, I was thinking, oh yeah, but like, of course everyone's literally in the same boat here. So you're failing, but they're going to go next and they're going to fail. And then, the next person's going to come up and they're going to fail, because you're all trying to do this clown class. You've all been given the same task to which arguably, like, well, that's it for the real world as well. The task, I guess, is succeed. And like you said, it's your version of success anyway.
Yeah.
And granted, you might find other people who have the same version of success as you, but they're all failing along the way as well. Like, so yeah, we're even all in the same boat. We're all trying to be clowns in that way. And so of course no one's going to be like judging you that harshly, because they're all facing the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about that as well, because obviously there is that like fear of failure. If before this class had how much did you know about this class? Like, did you know that would be the case? They're going to walk in, they're going to say, hey, cool, now do something funny. Like, if you had known that beforehand, would there be more hesitation to jump in?
Because I had spoken with Zach before, and he'd spoken about his own process of like going with failure and seeking it out almost like as this thing that it's so necessary, especially for his practice. And I'm really like, he's really talented. So I think I still would have gone to be like, oh, I'll learn, but I think I would have been really nervous.
Yeah.
But being thrown in the deep end to just be like, oh, okay, that's cool. And it's changed my life to the point of, it's the difference between knowing in your mind that failure is a necessary part of everything and you have to do it to be successful. And, like taking a step up the ladder is technically failing at getting to the top until you're there.
Right.
Like things like that. But then I knew it in my body, because I felt that weird, I don't know if it's like that rejection, that shame or something of like putting yourself out there and it not working, and then feeling it be fine immediately, feeling that it doesn't matter in a really lovely way, and then feeling that you will eventually get some successes. And it doesn't matter if I ended the day making no one laugh, or if I made someone laugh right at the end. Like, in my brain, like that was a really successful thing because it taught me so much.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was It was very, very good. I would recommend that everyone do a clowning class, or any class where you have to just get up and fail in front of people. Yeah. And it's put me in this mood where I was like, I want to start seeking out failures, which led me to the experiment I was telling you about. Yeah. And again, this is an original. I found it. I can't remember who the creator was, but it's this idea that if you have a goal, instead of making your goal, I think this person's example was they were an artist and they wanted to be exhibited. They wanted their work to be in an exhibit. So instead of making their goal, I am going to be exhibited, because that's so much pressure.
Oh, yeah.
She made her goal, I'm going to collect 100 rejection letters from galleries. And she was explaining it, and she said that she had to eventually stop doing it and stop collecting her failures because she started applying to, and obviously still putting in effort, but she would see ads for exhibitions going and she'd be like, oh, my work's not ready. And she'd be like, well, I need to collect a rejection letter. Like, I'll still submit.
Yeah.
And then she'd submit for things that she was like, oh, my art doesn't really suit, or I don't think I'm good enough, or all these things that she wouldn't have applied for, but because the goal was to collect all these rejection letters, she got so much work she had to stop. And she couldn't keep applying to things because she got into so many gallery exhibitions. Yeah. And I've seen people do the same thing with, if you want to get published, like if you want to get your stories published, get 100 rejection letters from magazines or anthologies. And I, at the time in my life, was like, I don't have any specific goal I want to achieve, so I'm just going to start collecting failures in general. Yeah. And one of the first things I did, and it made everything really exciting because it forced me to reach out to people and ask for things or try at things I would never think. And I had seen, have you heard of the New York City like midnight competition, NYC Midnight? Yeah. So I get targeted ads for that like every year.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And there was one for the microfiction contest, which is just writing a 100-word short story in 24 hours. Yeah. And it popped up again, and I got the feeling as well. I was like, I'd love to do that, but I'm not a writer. I'm not good. Yeah. Like, who cares? And then I was like, oh, hang on, that's a failure then. So I'll give it a go. And I gave it a go. And I think in my little division, I came fourth. And when I got the little thing that said that I'd come fourth, I cried because I was like, I have not done this for literal years. It's something I want to do. It's a challenge I wanted to set myself. And I never thought I was good enough, and I never thought it was something that I could do. And I tried and I placed. Yeah. Like, I was very happy. Like, I had my list of failures ended up being failures and then failed failures for things that I did end up doing a good job at.
So failed failures, also known as successes, but in this case, failed.
The focus was on failures. So people are like, oh, you failed at failing. I'm like, I know, it goes on the list.
Does that count as two then?
No, I'm just counting it as one.
Squared.
But it was really nice to have this moment of like, this is something that I honestly thought I was not qualified for, couldn't do anything. And then I did well. And so I went to the next round, failed. So that went on my failures list.
Didn't
get through. Yeah. And so I've been doing it this year as well. And it's just like that, just to have that moment of, this is something that I have been holding myself back from. Right. It was really fun to do. It was challenging. I loved doing it. I got to chat to my friends about it. I got some friends involved. I had friends who like read over like what I'd done and then be like, you did a good job. I like it. Yeah. It's a really nice experience, and it was something that I had barred myself on for literal years, right? Because I didn't want to fail at it. Yeah. And as soon as I made failing my priority, I did well.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Really good. And so then I did it with other things like, there was, I think, during one of the lockdowns, a viral little mushroom recipe where you pretty much used you made meringues, but you covered them in cocoa powder and made them into shapes so they look like little mushrooms.
That's cool.
And I was like, oh, well, I'll just give that a go. And then that ended up being like one of my favorite recipes I've made. Instead of being like, oh, I don't know how they turn out, I'll just make normal meringue. Be like, well, that's something I get to try. I get to try a new thing. Yeah. Ended up making a hat, like just knitting a beanie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It took me a full day of stopping and starting again. And then eventually I just made a hat.
Yeah.
All these things that I just wouldn't have done because like too hard, not going to do it. And I can't recommend enough just to start collecting failures. If you have a specific goal, do that.
Yeah.
But if you don't have a specific goal, just start collecting them because there's so many failures to be had. I made a croquembouche. I reached out, someone, there's a really beautiful, I've forgotten their name, maker of like stays and corsets. And they were like, oh, hey, like if you're in Victoria, like let me know. I need models for like my corsets and stuff. I'm like, wow, that would be really, really fun. So I messaged her and I didn't get the bid. But I was like, cool, now I know that when I message someone and they're doing a call out for artists or whatever, and if I message them back, nothing happens. Like that's not a bad thing. Like I'm not getting rejected.
Yeah, you know? And you haven't lost anything, which I think is that's the fear is like I'm going to lose I don't know, some part of me, some respect for myself, other people are going to lose respect for me. Like there's this idea of a loss, but like you're saying, it's actually, no, you're for sure gaining something.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it because failure feels like loss. And I feel like the way that we process, like, because that probably then translates to grief because grief is feeling loss and it's quite often when we lose a person, but you can have grief over any loss in your life. And I feel like if we're constantly fearing failure, then we're almost like, I don't know, pre-grieving or something. Or if we treat our failures like a loss that we have undertaken, that means you put your body through the process of grief. Yeah. And that's not to say that you can cheat your way out of grief sometimes because it's a very necessary part of being alive. It proves that you liked something. Yeah. But it's not necessary for everything. The way that we present ourselves to the world, the way we interpret the world, there's so much opportunity out there. And I also remember the first time I started working at Sanspants, one of the first podcasts I was on, I was like in my early 20s and I had this idea that I think a lot of people have where you're like, okay, you do school and you go to uni and then you get your career and you die and, like all that nice stuff. Yeah, yeah. And we did an episode of a podcast called Why Am I Sad? And we were talking about education systems or something. And Zamet started listing all the schools that he'd gone to. And I think he was like, yeah, did a year of art school, realized he didn't like it, stopped. Did a year of Chinese medicine, got to the first year, they finished anatomy. And then as they were doing their first year of anatomy, part of the class, they looked at a severed hand and the hand had pink nail polish on it. And he looked at it and was like, I can't do this. This is not for me. And then so he did Chinese therapy, art school, he did a massage course, he was an academic for a bit, he did like an honours thesis research, he wasn't taught at the university. And as he was saying all this stuff, I was like, oh my God, that is so cool. Like you have amassed all these really cool skills. You've tried so much. And I now feel like it feels really good when I have a go at something and I hate it. Yeah, I'm like, oh my God, ticked off. Like I never have to worry about, am I wasting my life not doing X if I've had a go? And he was saying all these things that he'd ever done. And I was like, I want a life like that. I want a life where I fill it like to the brim with new things and I give everything a go and, not overexert myself or anything, hopefully, but I was like, that is ideal. Yeah. But he was talking about courses he dropped out of, but like it put it in a new light of like, no, look at everything you tried. Like I think trying is the best thing you can do. And it's such a vulnerable act to have a go. Yeah. But it's like one of the most honest things you can do. And the worst case scenario is you get proof that it can't kill you. Yeah, right. And I know that's a really extreme thing to say, but when you have failed at something and then the rest of your life keeps going, it forces you to take stock and be like, oh, it's fine. And that's why I love clown school because you didn't even have time to wallow. You had to get up and try again immediately. Yeah, that's so powerful. Just the practice of that. Yeah, that's fantastic. Stuff. I love that as well because like even for Zam in that case, it's like, no, he hasn't failed at these courses. He's learnt they weren't right for him. Like again, that recontextualization of it means that, no, he's succeeded in finding out what wasn't right for him is sort of another way to do it. Yeah. And then I wanted to jump back to the grief thing because I kind of had a similar journey to you, not with like, I didn't go to clown class, but because I do write short stories and I was like, all right, I'm going to get some of these short stories published. It's sort of like a necessary first step to sort of getting more traditional publishing and getting some of your work out there. And so same as you, I thought, all right, I'm just going to go for it. And I would put a few out there and inevitably they got rejected because it's like, I was a pretty early writer. They like, arguably they were kind of in a sense right to be rejected and they weren't my best writing. But I remember the first few times it happened, it was like someone had king hit me in the solar plexus. It was just like, this like gut-wrenching feeling and it would sit with me all day, this thing. And I think it was grief for myself, but also like grieving the hope that I had that might, like, even though I'd put this thing out there, I'd sort of like taken that risk, I guess, of putting this thing out there. But now the hopeful person in me was like, oh, maybe they'll accept it. Maybe like all these nice maybes that I get to sort of sit with and sort of chew on and go, I hope that happens. And then as soon as that rejection, it was like, no. Here's your king hit. I'll open the email in the guts or whatever. But then same as you, I kind of went, I think it was actually hearing other writers talk about their steps to success. And obviously, everybody goes through failure because that is the process ultimately. And that reframing of it, like I think it might have been Stephen King was definitely one of them because I think he talks about it in his book on writing where he had like a nail or something on the wall and he would put all his rejection letters on this nail to the point that the nail couldn't hold them all up anymore because he had so many. And you're like, hold on, you're Stephen King.
And then I think even his son, Joe Hill, I remember reading something else where he had them like in a drawer or something like that. And I'm like, okay, well, these guys who obviously, they've done their duty of collecting all these rejection letters. And again, you're like reframing it's like, oh, I'm going to see how many I can get. And so a few years back, that was my goal. I remember that for that year, I'm like, I'm going to see how many rejection letters I can get.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and it like literally was so freeing, and it did everything you're saying where in my inbox I've got like a folder for rejection letters and a folder for acceptance letters. And the rejection one is there's many, many more megabytes of rejection letters than there are of acceptance letters. But it became this thing of every time one came through and I was like pumping those stories out, and every time I had like a nice spreadsheet for all my stories. I had all the different publications I wanted to send them to or competitions to enter and this sort of stuff. Great. That one rejected it. On to the next one. Like just keep reusing the same stories, rewriting new stories, putting them in the thing. But yeah, really just trying to get almost like seeing it as getting crosses across the board of all these rejections. And it did everything you said where like all of a sudden it felt like a weird win when one came like, oh, that's another one I can add to the list. Great. Cross that will go on my spreadsheet, cross that off. And then also that sense of like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like it was water off a duck's back now. That punch in the solar plexus was completely gone. Like did not matter. And then occasionally like when you would, eventually I would start getting acceptance letters and you're like, it was so unexpected. It's like, oh my gosh, what a win like that.
Yeah.
The grief was entirely gone because I kind of had, it wasn't that I didn't have hope anymore, I guess, but it didn't matter as much anymore. Like you're sort of talking about, it's the doing of it that's the important thing more so than that eventual success. And again, success is always, in inverted commas, because for me, the success ultimately became, I'm going to put as many stories out there as I can. So I was succeeding because that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so cool. I wasn't failing anymore. I was actually succeeding by failing.
I think, and maybe this is across the board for creative stuff, but I feel like you end up feeling more successful the more you create and the more you make, because that ends up being, well, that's kind of why you start. That's why you get into it, is to make things and you will make things and just be proud of them. Like they came from your head and you get to judge what's good. So of course you're going to pick good stuff to go in the thing you make.
Yes.
And it feels so nice to do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's not a trap, because I don't mean it in a negative way. It's how we're taught to view ourselves and the work that we produce. But it's like we're hanging on this little thread above a big black abyss. And they're like, cool, if you get the part, you get the job, you get the acceptance letter, we'll pull you up. And if not, we're just cutting it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so many things. And it can be really difficult. Any sort of application, even if you're going for like a house, you're like, oh no, there's one I really, really want.
Yeah,
and
I want it so bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't love the phrase everything happens for a reason, because I think the implications are a bit fucked, because sometimes awful things happen.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think you can always learn and grow from something. And I think taking those opportunities to learn and grow and taking them as opportunities to learn and grow is so helpful when you view them as such. And I don't think it makes bad things or rejections or anything. Sometimes it can make them easier if you change your mindset enough and, like you start collecting rejections.
Yeah.
But it makes, I think, the rest of your life a lot lovelier.
Yeah.
I had some friends and it was a new moon recently. So we went onto the beach and said what we wanted to release and take in for the new moon.
Yeah,
then we all did a big howl.
Yeah.
It was very, very nice.
Yeah.
But the thing that I wanted to work on specifically was I'd realized that, and again, this is still me trying to unlearn this like idea of failure. I wanted to learn more about myself and the way I interacted with the world, but instead of, how like sometimes working on yourself's hard and facing the reality of who you are can be a bit difficult if you want to be a better person. Yeah, it sucks. But I was like, I had a realization that whenever I thought about things like that, the idea of learning something I didn't like about myself was terrifying. And getting to the stage where I was like, cool, if there's something I want to change about myself, finding out that I've, not been a great person in some aspects, or if I've been doing something that's potentially like, not going to make other people feel great.
Yeah.
Like that's going to make me feel awful. And so for the new moon, I was like, I'm releasing that. And instead I'm going to welcome in excitement to grow. Yeah. Like I'm going to be really passionate about the opportunity to learn. That's awesome. Because if I do that, it becomes something really exciting. I get to achieve all those goals that I wanted to. There's not going to be fear attached to them anymore. I mean, like, it's a process. Probably still a bit of fear. But I'm trying to reframe things so that you get more done if you're working towards something positive. And I love what you said about having that like hopeful person in you, because you're right. Like you should always be hopeful. And another thing I've started doing, I don't know. Do you have a spiral?
Oh, for sure I do. Oh, yeah. God, yes.
My favorite thing to do, and again, This is by no means an original thing. But whenever you start to spiral, it's usually a thought process that keeps going down, 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 down. And potentially I've heard where people are like, oh, like I'm spiraling. If you have a really great imagination, you're going to spiral so hard.
Yeah,
because you can think of so many things that will go wrong, or like why something's bad. So you have one thought and it's like, oh, what if that happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? You corkscrew into the abyss.
This cascade has happened now of like, all these terrible things. All these people are going to think all these things and all the rest.
Yeah, and I think we do that when we're contemplating failure and we're thinking, what happens if I don't succeed? Because again, if we're having success as one fixed point, that's too much pressure to put on yourself, I personally think. But if you've got your success as one fixed point, that means that any miss of that one fixed point is going to be failure.
Yeah.
And because there are so many different pathways to what I would consider success, and we're not considering them a lot of the time, we're looking at one fixed point, it means that you've got so much room to spiral.
Yeah,
like literally, if this one thing doesn't happen, it is a failure. That means every other outcome in the world you can spiral off of. So, I mean, for that, I would obviously recommend changing your idea of success, like as you were saying, like making it so that you're creating stories. Like for me, one of my goals in life is to make people laugh. And I know that there are so many ways that I can do that. And like I can do that, you know, on a stage or with my friends or on Twitter, you know, I can do so many different ways to feel my version of success. And it's not a fixed point. It's not like I'm like, I have to perform at this venue on this time. I have to have this many people in the crowd. Like, you know, and I think it's fine to have goals like that. But to pin success to a fixed point, I think is not fair in a fluid world. So what I've started doing instead is if I feel myself spiraling, obviously change your point of success. So spiraling becomes a bit trickier. Start spiraling up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Because first of all, you're not psychic. You don't know the future.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what's going to happen. No, you don't. Yeah. Absolutely not. Yes. Do not claim that for yourself. First of all, take yourself down a peg. You can't tell the future.
Yeah.
Second of all, okay, when have you been right about a spiral?
Right.
Is it often? Nope. Has it ever? Probably not.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone really reaches the depths of a spiral and actually has it happen into fruition. So, you know, in that first part, you don't know what you're talking about. Respectfully, you have no idea what you're talking about. Second of all, if you're so creative as to make all these spirals, then force yourself to spiral up.
Right.
And it's a really good exercise to force your brain into stopping and doing something else. It occupies your brain, it uses all that creative energy, and it feels ridiculous. But then it makes you realize all of the ridiculous things you're saying. So I'm going to go to this gig and I'm going to, you know, I'm probably going to say the wrong thing and then people are going to not like me. No one's going to like, blah, 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 spiral down. It's like, all right, idiot. I'm going to go to this gig and find $100 on the ground. Oh, that's ridiculous. Yeah, so's your thing.
Right, exactly.
Cool. You're going to find $100 on the ground. Okay, then what? And then you're going to make everyone laugh so hard, someone in the first row pisses themselves. Oh, that's a bit ridiculous. So was the other thing. No one's going to hate you for saying 2 words. You're fine.
Yeah.
And forcing yourself to do that upward spiral.
Yeah.
I find it so nice because it's distracting, it's silly, it makes you realize in a really fun and nice way that, like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And like, even like what you're talking about, like putting all this pressure on this certain fixed point. If this one thing doesn't go wrong, everything else is going to go wrong behind it. Like, put so much weight on it. And so by doing that, you're just lifting that weight right off. It's like clearly that's not going to happen.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New subscribers only. Renew for 12 months to lock in savings. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Yeah, putting your version of success to be a goal, because that's different. If you have a goal, that's one thing, sick. Make sure your goals are as fluid and changing as the world around you is. If you've got one goal and, you know, you want to submit to a journal that gets shut down, okay, like that can still be a fluid goal. You can change it to a different goal, but your goal can't be your success because goal is thing.
Yes.
Success is how you want to move through the world.
Right. And like, I really like that because even like success it's not a single thing. It's an ongoing thing. And it's like you said right off the bat, it's individual to every person. So then not only is it individual to you, but it's going to change day to day because your goals, like you're saying, those goals are either going to, you might reach those goals, you might not. Your goals might change entirely if you decide, like, damn it, that there's actually I don't even like this thing that I'm doing or it's not right for me.
Yeah.
So that you can be successful almost always. You're successful just because you're putting yourself out there and you're trying these things and you're finding out they're not for you, or that, yeah, you did submit X amount of stories to X amount of places or whatever. So success is almost like, if we're doing it right, this arguable constant. I don't want to put too much pressure on anyone on there either.
Yeah.
But it's more just that, yeah, because it's more framing it as goals v success or goals over success because, well, yeah, goals are tangible. Yeah. You can come up with a multitude of goals.
I think you're always going to have goals. And I think one of the most beautiful things about human beings and being alive is also the thing that just absolutely fucks us sometimes, which is that we always strive to be better and better and better.
Yeah.
And I think that rules. Like, if that is the thing that motivates us to, invent stuff and try new things, it is that driving force of innovation. And I think it is, it is one of the coolest things about people.
Yeah.
That we constantly keep reaching forward and forward and forward. And, we're never happy with what we do and we want to be better and better and better. And again, that does drive innovation and that keeps us in that beautiful perpetual motion. But it can get us stuck sometimes.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And there's so much pressure and it means that we don't look back because we're always looking forward. And again, adorable for some things, love people, think they're great.
Yeah.
But we need to be conscious of that thing that we have in us that keeps us propelling through the sky.
Yeah. I agree. And I like even just the way you even just moving towards a goal is like something you said before, there's lots of different ways to actually get the goal. Like you're talking about, making people laugh. There's so many different avenues to do that on rather than if you're fixing yourself to one. And another writer I really like, Neil Gaiman, he talks about it as moving towards the mountain, as though the mountain is sort of this eventual goal in the distance and whatever. And so like when you come across a decision you make, like, is it moving you closer to the mountain or further away from the mountain? And it's not necessarily like, oh, one's right and one's wrong. It's just like, well, is it achieving the thing I want to achieve or is it not? And so in terms of like success and failure, it's like, well, you've moved closer to the mountain. It might not be you're at the mountain yet.
Yeah.
Or that, but I can see there's a track over there that like that's the traditional track to get to the mountain or whatever it might be. Cool, but this one's still getting you close to the mountain, so that's got to be a good thing, and so, yeah, I think just that awareness of, trying different things to get to the place you want to be or just to achieve a goal or just trying them for the sake of trying them, all of it's like good. And then ultimately it's like failure stops being that important of a thing in that journey because you're just like, it's more interesting in what you can do rather than what you might fail to do, I guess.
Do you have any goals or like what's your version of success?
That's a great question. So for me, this is going to sound a bit arrogant. I see myself as successful already. And that's purely because like I had a very low bar for myself. Someone asked me recently, like, because I'm a writer, like, oh, what are your writing goals? And I'm like, I've actually already achieved them. My writing goals were to try to be a writer because like I was very much like a very shy, kind of nervous teenager and then was following that path of like, well, I guess I better follow what I deem as traditional success. I'll go to university, I'll study a thing that will get me a job, that will pay me money, and I guess I'll climb that ladder in that job, earn all the monies, and now I've been successful.
Straight path to the mountain.
Yeah, straight to that mountain. I think there's a highway there, I better take that highway. And so basically that's what I was doing. And so I went into science because my year 12 science teacher said, you're good at this. So I thought, okay, I enjoy learning about science. It turns out I don't really enjoy the practical side of science because it's quite monotonous and, you've got to have a real sort of fixed brain for that, where I always loved creativity. I was always drawing and I did webcomics for years and this sort of stuff. I got halfway through my uni degree and realized, oh, this isn't actually right for me. But I thought, well, a full degree is better than half a degree. I better finish. And so I finished and rah. And then ultimately by the time I finished uni, I had a gap year and went overseas. And by the time I came back, I'm like, well, all I want is money. So I've got this degree. I might as well use it to start earning some money. And so I've got a job in that field and started that climbing the ladder stuff and getting better jobs and all the rest. But I wasn't really loving any of it. And I also felt super unfulfilled on the creative side of things. But there was a part of me that was like, had accepted this was my life forever.
Yeah.
Like 100% completely accepted it. And part of it was definitely a fear of failure. Obviously, the creative world is, one, it's like full of failure. You have to fail.
It's mostly failure.
It's mostly failure. Exactly right. And especially like then the idea of like the freelance lifestyle, which is exactly what I'm living now. It's like it's so tumultuous and you're going to be poor a lot of the time and other time you might be really time poor. And it's just like all these different pressures that are never constant. So you kind of like, for me who was a bit more fearful and obviously a routine is such a comfort, all that would be out the window. So like I'd so convinced myself that was my path that I didn't really ever conceive of anything else. And then I don't even really know what the catalyst it might have been just like dating my now wife and her being so encouraging, or even just getting to a point in my job where I'm like, oh no, I can't do this forever. Like, oh no, Damian, you were wrong. This is like, you thought you could do this? No. And so then me, like, basically I left that job and went and did the Masters of Screenwriting. And so me doing that, like taking that leap into doing the Masters of Screenwriting and trying to be a screenwriter and taking that fearful leap away from comfort and security, like already that was like, oh, I've done it. Like, again, which sounds a bit arrogant in that, oh, I've already reached success. But literally from that point on, I haven't really had expectations in terms of, oh, I've got to achieve all these things for people to see me as a great writer. And so like anytime I've gotten into a writer's room or I have had a story published or whatever it might be, it's always like, oh, well, that's nice. Yeah. Oh, I didn't expect that, you know? And so literally, yeah, that's kind of my feeling. And it's maintained, even though like, of course, because if you do anything enough, you get better at it and you do start to progress.
Absolutely.
That all ties into failure as well, because yes, of course, the only way to get good at something is to fail, you know, that's old hat. So yeah, I've managed to do some really cool, fun stuff, even just doing these podcasts and everything. Like I love doing them, and it's something that once was inconceivable to me. So the fact that I get to get up and do any of that stuff already feels like a big old win for me. So what about for you? How do you see for yourself?
I just want to touch on the doing something that feels inconceivable, because that was, again, for me, one of the driving catalysts, like that just brought me to tears, because I was like, I didn't think I could do that, and I did it. Yeah. And I not only did it, I did an okay job, which was a fun bonus. And I've done so many things where I haven't done an okay job and I've still loved it. Like the process is really fun to me. So yeah, I think good advice is to do something inconceivable, even if it's just small.
Yeah.
I think I had while I was in uni, so I studied linguistics, and it was because it was something I enjoyed doing. And for a while I considered a job in academia, and then the idea of having to grade papers made me want to die. I spoke to someone who, I think they were a tutor in marking papers, and they were telling me that in theirs, I think they had about 2 minutes to grade every essay, or unpaid overtime to actually give the students feedback. And I was like, that would break my brain. I would hate that.
Yeah, I actually face that at the moment so I teach screenwriting now. Like our grading time is not appropriate to what we have to, like in my second semester I get whole scripts from the students.
Oh my God. So you need to dedicate time to I get that. No good. So consider doing that for a bit, but there was one class in uni that I did. It was Japanese, and my preferred study style was to not. So every time I would study a language, it would get to you'd study your language, and then at the end of the week you'd do your little vocab test.
Right, yeah.
And Japanese, the way they structured it was they would give you all of the vocab to learn over the weekend. So you did the vocab test on Monday when you came in, and then the rest of the week, because you already knew the words, you could fit it all into the grammar, so you could focus more on the grammar.
Yeah.
And Japanese is super phonetic, so it's like once you know the basics, it's not hard to learn new vocabulary, and like they'd structured it really well.
Yeah.
But I just didn't study, so I did the first semester. I think there were like 2 weeks where I studied really hard for the vocab test, because I was so just out of it. I studied for the wrong weeks.
Oh no! Oh no!
And I cooked it. I should have done a lot of things different.
Yeah.
But I remember getting to the mid-year, and every single time my friend would walk me to class and be like, "Hey, you are stressed every single time you go in. You should stop doing it." And I just looked at them. I was like, no, I have to finish the year. And they were like, no, you don't. And I was like, no, but I do. I started it. I have to finish it.
Yeah.
And so I stuck at it.
Yeah.
And so I felt awful every time I was in class because I didn't know what I was doing. It was really embarrassing. I also, for whatever reason, that did not encourage me to study. I just didn't.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, I've got my own things going on. But that was the thing. I had someone point out to me, like, I can see you're unhappy.
Yeah.
Don't do this thing anymore.
Stop the
and I was
thing
like,
that's making you unhappy.
But I have to finish it.
Yeah.
And that taught me a really valuable lesson in knowing when to quit. Now I love a good quit.
Yeah.
I find acknowledging your own choice in your own life the most empowering thing you can do.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Oh my God. Even just little things like when people are like, oh, I've got this dinner on Sunday. It's like with my extended family I don't get along with or whatever. I have to go. And it's like, you don't. It's like, but I do it. It's like, technically you can start walking out your front door and never come back.
Yes.
You don't have to do anything. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess if I don't go, I've got these consequences. Like, okay, so you would rather do this than face those consequences? Like, yeah. It's like, okay, awesome. Like, that makes it a choice for you. And I know that's really helped me a lot in my life to be like,
I love that.
To be like, oh, I really don't want to do this. It's like, okay, what are my options? Stay in bed all day. Go to the shops, wag. Like, here are all my other options for the day. Do I want to do them? No. Why? Because I want to, get paid for the work I do, or I
Right.
want to maintain, whatever I'm doing at that time. Like, it really doesn't matter. You'll eventually find a reason that you want to do it,
Yep.
or you won't.
Yeah, right.
So it allows you to make those decisions for yourself, because really you don't have to do anything. You can walk into a shop and just start stealing stuff.
Yeah.
And it's probably, and you'll think about it and you'll probably be like, I don't want those consequences. Sick choice.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
So doing that in uni, making the wrong choice myself, not quitting when I should have, taught me I think about $785 lesson.
Yeah, right.
Invaluable.
Yeah, yeah.
Worst grade I ever
agree.
got,
Yeah.
and best life lesson I ever got.
Yeah.
Came out of uni, and I will every now and then have a moment. It's still something I'm working through where I'm like, oh, I got an office job that was like pretty well paying. It had opportunities to move up.
Yep.
Got like a little promotion, and then went for another promotion, and I didn't get it. And then when I went back to my desk after not getting the promotion, I just had this moment of like, oh, I'm so bored. Like if I'm thinking about the next promotion, I'm like, oh God, like I just have to do this for like another year until the promotion comes up again. If I'm thinking about if I got the promotion, I would have been excited because it's something different. And I didn't realize that that's what I was excited about until I sat down and had to keep doing the same thing. And I was like, oh no. And then I had moments of my family being like, hey, you are really stressed at this job. I had to sort out my brain. I didn't know my brain was bung.
Yeah.
I had to fix my brain. But during that process of like me sort of going to see a psychologist and be like, clean it up.
Yeah. See this thing? Could you just give it a rub down?
Have a zhuzh.
A bit of a
Give it a
zhuzh.
little zhuzh. So at the time, like a lot of that stress was just coming from my job, because where else would it come from? And my family was like, why are you staying at that job? I'm like, oh, to make money. Oh, no. No. That's
Damn it, I did it.
upsetting. No. And so I went in and quit immediately.
Yeah,
but I mean,
fantastic.
like we had a busy period, so I was like, I'll stay to the end. And my boss
Yeah.
was like, you don't have to. And I was like, no, I want to. Like,
Right.
you've been really good to me.
But again,
Like,
choice. Yeah,
again,
you made that
choice.
yeah.
She gave me an out. She was like, you can leave now. And I was like, nah, I'll stay. And that was really, really helpful. And then I lived off some savings, drained them,
Yep.
started doing podcasting. And I think I'm now in the process. I mean, I've been doing this for years now, and I'm in the process of trying to renegotiate what success means to me, what goals I want to set for myself, so that I can live a life that I feel is successful. Because I feel like I think this is not a bad problem to have, but I have been, again, being like, what I want to do day to day.
Right.
Not thinking too far into the future, not for any bad reason, but just like waking up in the morning being like, I get choices. What am I picking?
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
is lovely. And I really like that because it makes me feel a lot more present. But now I want to make sure that I set little goals. As I said, like success for me is making people laugh. But another thing that I feel makes me successful when I do it is acquiring little skills.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
being able to do cool things pretty much. Like I will take a little pottery course or do like, there's a bunch of like classes offered in the city where you do like 1 or 2 weeks and so, not too much money. You come out with a new skill. You can do jewelry making or pottery or whatever. Those things just like fuel me. I love getting my hands dirty, making
Brilliant.
something.
Yeah.
So for those two, I'm like, okay, well maybe out of that I can set myself some goals along the way so that I have something more tangible to work toward because like having that forward momentum is really, really nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've slingshotted the other way. I feel like throughout your life, you're just going to be a little ball in a rubber band. You're going to bounce back and forth. You're going to pong, and then eventually everything's going to sort of relax and you find yourself in the middle.
I get that. Yeah, I kind of came to the same thing where that is definitely part of the reason I left the science world was because, I was kind of bored. And it is that thing of realizing, I can take my life into my own hands.
Yeah.
And it is like, the only thing that's actually stopping me is me. There really isn't anything else.
You just get to pick.
Right. And then like that is, I can't express how like life-changing literally that is. It also comes with like, that means I am in control. But I actually think mostly it's just like recognizing that, you've got all this control over yourself and you can do all these exciting things. And then I think it's sort of, like the ball bouncing back. It's like, I can do nothing if I want. And like, that's really exciting for a little bit. But then ultimately learning that actually doing nothing sucks. Like it's really boring and it's as boring, arguably more boring than the office job. At least the office job, someone's giving you goals to achieve and you do get a little feeling of satisfaction anytime you achieve one. Whereas as soon as you take that life into your own hands and you sort of, I can do nothing, I can do anything, rah, rah, rah. But then, then I think it is about that next step of that process is learning, I need to create my own goals then. And then that to me is like super exciting. That's when it gets really interesting and fun because cool, okay, well, what do I want to do today? What is success for me today? Especially if you're lucky enough to sort of have the opportunities to pursue those things that you really, really want. then cool. Today I'm going to go and record a podcast with my friend and have a lovely chat, or I'm going to work on that project that I've been really excited about, or I had a new idea. Let's put some hours aside for that today. Like all that, like there's still goals. You're not doing nothing now. You're doing stuff, but you're doing it purely for you. And you still get that nice sense of satisfaction that you had at your job, plus a greater one because you're being creative and you're pursuing those goals that you're after. And I just think, it's like really powerful. And sometimes the thing with failure is that it allows you to go down those avenues. Like if you hadn't failed, you might never have put that down. You might have kept going and trying that thing and finishing that Japanese course. And I guess I better go do the next step of whatever, doing my honors in Japanese. Now I guess I'm teaching Japanese or whatever it is. And so sometimes failure means you can just put them down and try something else. And like, it's so freeing and great when it happens.
On the Japanese course thing, I was so convinced that I was going to literally fail the course that I started getting really excited for what subject I was going to use to make it up with.
Right.
So I picked out one and it was all about like the history of witch hunts and witch trials all about like that whole feminine persecution thing. And then I passed. And I was like, all right. Okay, that's fine. And I think, that was also at the catalyst of me being like, I did not have to do that.
Yeah.
But having those things in mind, I feel like, I don't know if you get this, when you start pursuing a creative path, people will be like, well, what's your backup plan? And then there's that whole argument of like, I don't want to have one. Like if I'm dedicating time to a backup plan, that means I'm probably going to need it because I'm not dedicating time to the thing I want to do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like I now have little backup plans that I get excited about. And they're not things I dedicate like time to, but it's like, okay, what if I had a job once and I was like, I think they might fire me. And I was like, what if that happens? It was like, all right, if they fire me, I am going to do this course and start running my own business. Like I'll start my own version of what they've hired me to do because I reckon I can do it.
Yeah.
And they didn't fire me. Yeah. And it's like, I guess I'm still employed. I guess that's a good one. And then it's like, maybe to know that I had all the fire behind me, it's like, maybe I will just start my own business one day.
Yeah.
And I have that like in my mind is like, that is something I could just do because again, not that I was putting hours into researching stuff. It was like, no, I just know like these are the courses I could do and that's a path I can take. But like that's in my brain now as if I get bored or I decide I just really want to do it one day, I could just do that. Yeah. And I'm allowed. Yeah. No one's going to stop me.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that like just the idea of what, let's call it failure in that terms is in losing your job meant it opened this whole new door for you that was like super exciting and like interesting and of course you could do it. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. Of course you could. Like again, this to go back to the self-helpy stuff, but like anyone who ever has done those things, it's because they realized, I can just do that. I can do the education, I can put into practice and I can do the thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's, none of that comes without failure ultimately.
No. And the thing you were talking about or that we were talking about with the ball bouncing back and forth, I remember when I had, gone to have my brain zhuzhed, as I was starting to feel like properly like myself and like I was really capable of just like being calm and good. I remember over the period of about close to a year, I felt like I had exactly the same ball bouncing thing. I had 3 realizations. The first one was like, oh my God, I actually could do anything. Where I was like, I could, go to a course, start my own business. I could, if I wanted to, go back, study heaps and become a doctor. I absolutely don't want to do that. Yeah. But like that is something that I, in theory, could do. Like there's not anything that like that thing that we were talking about before, like your own barriers are you.
Yeah.
In the most case, and I get very privileged people, but like in a lot of the instances, you will stop yourself from doing something before another person will.
Yeah.
And again, I know that doesn't apply. That's very privileged, but I think it's a good way to start looking at things. And I was like, oh, cool, I just could do anything. And then about 6 months later, I had but I don't have to do anything. Yeah. And I had the realization of like, I could get up and leave any situation I'm in. Yeah. Started taking absolute joy in being like, I could just leave this party. Like, even I was, having fun, be like, I could just walk outside. I'm going home. Yep. And now whenever I go to a party, like if it's with a friend, we'll like plan the night and get really excited to get ready. And then it's like, okay, so what takeaway getting on the way home? Like, and like make the going home really exciting as well. So that's like a nice thing that came out of that. And then another 6 months went by and I was like, oh no, I could do anything. And then I was like, I could start stealing. Like, who's going to stop me? And then I'm like, well, I will. I probably don't want to steal it. Again, I'm going to learn about the consequences and I don't want those. But I was like, no, I could do anything. Yeah. You could just start like kicking stuff in the street. Again, don't want to, don't encourage it. But the fact is that you could do anything, even if it's bad.
Yeah.
You're allowed to do bad things.
Right.
You're allowed to do a bad job.
Yeah.
But do you want to? Probably not. Like, you probably don't want to do all those things.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an example of like, wow, humanity's great because we don't steal and we don't punch people in the head.
Yeah.
Having that bounce back of like,
Right.
whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. And then again, be like, but I don't have to.
Okay,
and I
let's
don't want
find
to.
a
And
nice
it's like,
middle here. Yeah.
all those choices again, just having everything culminate to really just be like, wow, you just can do most things.
Yeah.
And it's so much about choice.
Yeah, and it is like, but I do think it's shedding that fear of shedding that fear of failure means that all this choice is available to you, and then it's about finding the nice spot for you to fit in within that. Like, that's empowering. It's also arguably a little bit terrifying because so much choice.
Yeah.
But then it's just the journey of finding it, and even that journey, cool. That's a fun thing. Enjoy that journey, I guess.
Yeah, and like even from maybe a bit self-indulged perspective, like not as in myself, but if you think about people who you've met, who you have conversations where you're like, wow, they're really interesting. They usually do heaps.
Yeah,
and it's not that they're doing heaps all the time, but like with Zama, when like I first started working here, I was like, whoa, you're someone I look up to and you've done so much. That is so impressive to me.
Yeah.
But like, think about when you're chatting to someone at a party, it's like, oh, what are you doing? Like, I did this, hated that. You're like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
like,
tell me more. Yeah.
That's always the thing that is, again, exciting about being alive. We get to do so much and we get to pick so much of it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's definitely the sort of revelation I've come on. And like, it's definitely something I try to spruik to other people. I think most people need to like ultimately come to the realization themselves.
You got to, we all know it in our heads. You got to feel it in your body.
Yeah. But when you kind of like, and this is another thing of like shedding that fear of failure, like throwing the hat over the fence. I remember my dad basically having this chat with him once where he was much like me, where he had always just stayed on that highway and pretty much he didn't really ever pursue what was right for him. He just sort of said yes to things that came his way. And not in a yes man situation where he's out doing wacky things and, whatever, in more like, hey, his older brother said, you'd be a good pharmacist. So he was a pharmacist. And so like he sort of followed this path where it was just like, following that highway of doing all those things that are right for him. And he could kind of recognize that was in me. And I remember him having this great chat with me once where he sort of said, oh, you're like me. You won't do anything unless you've got it all perfect in your head. And when you're going to do it, you're going to do it 100% right. Yeah. Which is like, okay, well, then you mostly don't do anything because the things you're going to be 100% right on are very few and far between.
Yeah. And you don't know you're going to be right until you do them, which
that's
means
it too, yes.
Just do
exactly.
them.
Yeah, just give it a go. But
you don't know the future, dingus.
Yeah, get out of here, you dumb boys. And so, he sort of said, but what you need to do is just throw your hat over the fence so you have to go over and pick it up.
I love that.
Yeah. And literally it's like, okay, there are times where I'm like, oh, but what if? And then that's when I go, oh, okay, I just need to throw the hat. Like even this podcast was like, for so long I had the idea for this podcast. I had a bunch of stories that had been rejected. I'm like, I still like these stories. Like, and again, they were rejected because they weren't right for those publications, but I still thought there was value in them, and there is and was. And so I always wanted to put this podcast out, but for so long I was like, oh, but I probably need a proper voice actor to do the readings of the stories, and like, how many do I need to do? If I want listeners to keep listening, I guess I better do like one a week. That's obviously impossible, all these sorts of reasons to not do it. And then finally I kind of like, okay, you need to throw your hat over the fence, just commit to doing it. And so then like the first thing I did was like make the logo, make the cover art. I'm like, oh, I like that. Now this has to happen sort of thing. Anyway, and then the cascade followed on from there. And again, it's actually kind of, it makes me kind of think of your positive spiral where it's like all of a sudden I had this nice cover art. They're like, well, maybe people will like it and maybe I can just read them and that'll be okay. And then finally I like had the idea of these chats to sort of add some extra episodes. I'm like, oh, I'm actually really excited about that. The stories are good, but now I'm like, This is sort of generally the part I'm really enjoying the most at the moment. And so by throwing the hat over the fence and just having to go pick it up, all of a sudden, I get to do this great thing and have so much joy in doing it in the interim. Where if I had gone, I better wait till I've got all the pieces lined up the fictional pieces lined up in my head, I never would have done it and I would have robbed myself of all that joy.
I'm glad you've got your joy.
Yeah.
And on the throwing your hat over the fence thing, one of my favorite phrases at the moment is something's going to happen.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like,
I don't know what.
You don't know. You wake up in the morning, oh, you want to do something? Cool, something's going to happen.
Yeah, let's find out.
Yeah, there'll always be something. And that, we were talking about grief before, that is one of the things that I personally find moves me through grief really fast. It's like, something's going to happen. Like, maybe this is a bit on the darker side, but going through grief, I find always makes me feel like time gets a bit fuckled.
Right.
just because you're grieving and time goes a bit weird.
Yeah.
So I always find I have to like manually restart time by just doing tasks.
Yeah.
And it's so weird. You'd never feel more like a sim where you're like, this bad thing has happened to me and I have to have a shower. Like, time to go to work. Like, I've got to buy a grocery and keep myself fed. And it's so weird. All these things seem really weird and insignificant, but something's going to happen. Something's always going to happen. You kind of have to keep doing things. And like, that's what I find to manually restart time. But like, even though that's, obviously a sad context.
Right.
Doing that for just day-to-day life is so lovely too. It's like, if you feel like nothing's really going on, like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm not really doing anything at the moment. Like, well, something's going to happen. Are you going to pick? Or are you going to let the world pick for you? Because something's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, we might leave it on that note because I think that's beautiful. This has been a blast. Thank you so much for joining me.
I've had so much fun. Thank you.
I've had so much fun, honestly. All right. Well, if you'd like to hear more from Cass, you can check out her stellar podcasts, Shut Up a Second, D&D's for Nerds, and Why Am I Sad? Did I leave any out? That's all of them?
No, that's all of them.
Yay. Happy days. All right. Or you can find her on Twitter at Cass Paige. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Midday Pajamas, or feel free to send me an email at shorttales.podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, this has been Short Tales, and I've been Damian Robb. And while this podcast will always be free, if you'd like to throw a few dollars, euros, rands, pounds, francs, yen, or any other currency at me to allow me to keep writing and releasing short tales, and hopefully put out a few bigger projects down the line as well, you can do so by visiting my Ko-Fi page, which you can find at ko-fi.com/Damian Robb. Or you can find the link in the episode show notes. Thanks for listening.